Said how many times have I tried to turn this love around, but every time you just let me down. Come on, be a man about it. You'll survive. Sure that you can work it out all right. Tell me yesterday, did you know I'd be the one to let you go? Over me too, yeah. Seems like my time has come and now I'm moving on. I'll be stronger. Set me free out this misery. Show me the way. Show me the way. My life again. You can't handle me. No.
Life again. You can't handle me. I'm out of love. Set me free. So anyway, that's Anastasia, everybody, with a great song, I'm Out of Love. I don't know if you know who Anastasia is, but Anastasia is a very well-known kind of dance singer. She's been around for a while. I can't remember her other songs. She has a lot of songs and that you may have heard in the past, especially in the club circuit or whatever. I mean, she's been around long enough that I was still going to the clubs occasionally when she was still new, kind of years ago. So anyway, that was Anastasia. Welcome to the Off Limits Show. It's your host, Donovan, and I'm here talking to you today about whatever the fuck's on my mind, as usual. But tonight we're doing more of a stream of consciousness show. So I'm just going to say whatever the hell comes in my head without any editing of anything, pretty much. So, which is not all that different than usual for me. It's pretty much the way I live my life, which gets me in trouble a lot. But, you know, it is what it is. I am who I am, as you are as well. Anyway, so it is actually it's May. It's the first day of May 2018. And wow, it's May. So in 1 month, I'll be 1 year older. 1 month and 6 days. So June 7th, I'll be 1 month older. Yay. That's always fun and exciting to be older, you know. I don't know. A lot of stuff, good stuff comes with age, of course, you know, for example, wisdom. And, you know, people aren't always wise as they age. I mean, to me, I think as you age, wisdom comes if you actually work at figuring life out. Some people just kind of go through life, stumbling through life without any kind of plan, without any kind of knowledge or understanding of their own self or their own self-awareness. And I think as long as you do, I mean, you definitely, as you age, become wiser and you learn from your past mistakes. You know, your history and the things you've achieved and accomplished have made you wiser as well. So I definitely will be wiser, but I'll also be older, and that kind of sucks. You know, physically we get old, and we get old, we get old, we get older, we get older, we get older. We have no option about this. This is just the way it is. As being a human being, we're going to get older, and our bodies are going to start to sag, and we're going to get fatter, and we're going to get wrinklier, and we're going to get slower and frailer, and it's just an exciting thing to look forward to. But I'm not there yet, of course. But I certainly, you know, I'm kind of I'm knocking on the doorstep a little bit of you know, the end of my youth, of course. You know, I'm 42, so I'll be 43 in June, and you know, I'm definitely middle-aged already, right? I'm middle-aged for sure. So I'll definitely be getting up to the 50s in a few years. But I'm still in my early 40s, so I'm not that old, but I still feel like it sometimes. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about, like I said, whatever comes to my mind. So it'll be various things. And also I'm going to actually just play music occasionally when the mood strikes throughout the show. So feel free, if you are listening to the show live, which very few people listen to the show live, but anymore, you know, when I first started the show, it was constantly, people were calling in every single show, and it was for the first 2-3 years of the show. Actually, first 5 years, I'd say, of the show. This is the 9th year of the Off Limits show. Wow, I've been doing the show for 9 years. When I first started the show, I was doing it every single day. Every single day. I don't know how I had the time to do that, but I did, and I did it, and it was exhausting, but it was fun and engaging for me. And the reason I started the show was because I wanted to talk about politics, and you know, I never play my tagline anymore, you know, that I used to play all the time on the show, which was this. I'll play it real quick.
You're listening to Off Limits, liberal, irreverent, and really, really gay.
So, yeah, that was the Off Limits show introduction. It's a long little 1-minute song, but anyway, I actually had that song made for the show. And I used to play that. I created that tagline. That's me saying that, of course. I used to say that all the time at the beginning of every show, or used to play that at the beginning of every show. I don't know why I didn't do anymore. I think I just prefer to play music. I mean, of course, I could play that, then play the music, I guess, but it would seem kind of anticlimactic or something. I don't know. Anyway, so what was my point? Oh, and so yeah, so when I first started the show, I did this every day practically, and there's so many people on the show, and as I said, that I had guests all the time and people calling in, and they're always randoms and trolls and things like that as well, calling into the show. And, you know, I kind of missed that to some degree because at least I got some people to yell at, you know. I had people to fucking argue with, you know, about politics and religion and gayness and whatever, you know. So that was always fun. So if you ever want to talk to me live on the show, you can call into the show live. Actually, I probably should open Skype. Let me do that real quick so you can actually call in if you decide to. Which most of you are probably working at a 9-to-5 job, so you're probably going to be doing that today. But if you don't, feel free to call in on Skype by using Off Limits Show as the call name. So, anywho, what does this say right here? This is interesting. I'm looking at this. I haven't opened Skype in so long, and it's like you can start a conversation with somebody. Pick someone that you may know. But I know people on here, and I don't want to talk to you. So I'm like going to really... Jason Dotley's on here. I forgot about him. We had an interview with him years ago. He was really cool. I liked him. Anyway, so yeah. Speaking of politics and religion and like things like that, I have a friend. Her name is Kathy, and she has this neighbor. He's 18 years old. She's 47. She'll be 48 in May, I think. Anyway, they hang out a lot. Anyway, and so he is heterosexual, and so is she. And anyway, she's always had her best friend is gay. His name is Ken. Ken's also my best friend. That's how she and I know each other. So she's always had gay men around her beyond just Ken and myself. And she's always liked gay guys. And so she's always been a very staunch, proponent of gay rights and that sort of thing as well. Anyway, so she has this 18-year-old friend. He was 17 when she met him, and now he's 18, and they hang out all the time. It's really kind of strange, but whatever. Anyway, so she said the other day, was talking to us. We were all going to dinner or lunch or whatever, and she was talking about how he said to her that homosexuality is a choice and that it's wrong or whatever. Now, it irritates me, first of all, that an 18-year-old, barely 18-year-old, thinks he knows anything about anything. Because, I think it's hilarious to me that this kid thinks he has the world figured out at 18. Now, first of all, this guy is a huge pothead. I mean, all he ever does is smoke pot. He's constantly high. I mean, he's never not high. And he lives with his mother, and he's not exactly the most, ambitious person. And so, and he's not the most intelligent or bright either. He's not the most, he's just not. So anyway, so I told her I'm gonna have to have a conversation with him next time I see her and over at her house and he's there, comes over or whatever, because every time somebody says that, it drives me insane. And it's not because, and I've always said this too, if homosexuality were actually a choice, okay, let's just say for the sake of argument that homosexuality is a choice, which it isn't, but let's say that it is, okay, for the sake of debate. Okay, so it's a choice. What fucking difference does that make? Why would that be anything? Why would that make any difference to whether people have civil liberties and civil rights and that sort of thing? Even if it were a choice, it doesn't mean that it is not someone's right to love someone of the same sex, or to have sex with people of the same sex, or to have families, or whatever the case may be, or have equal rights. That has nothing to do with it. And I know that, unfortunately, a lot of people use that argument as a means of saying, okay, well, if it is a choice, then it's not a right, or to be gay, or to be who you are. Sexual orientation is a choice, or whatever. And so I want to say that first is that it doesn't matter if it's a choice or not. Honestly, it's still people deserve their rights, but it isn't a choice. And I think most people who have a brain recognize that it isn't a choice. Now, what I'm going to say to little Michael, that's what we call him, little Michael, because my husband's name is Michael. We call him little Michael. We're going to say to little Michael is, what I'm going to say when I see him is, are you right-handed or left-handed? He's going to say probably, let's say he says left-handed. I don't know. And I don't know if he's right-handed or left-handed. Let's say he says left-handed. So you're left-handed. Okay. So when did you choose to be left-handed? He'll say, well, I don't know. He probably say something like, I don't know. Well, I just am, whatever. Well, it's the same thing with being gay. You just are. Now, can you write with your right hand even though you're left-handed? Yes, you can. You can write with your right hand, but it's awkward and doesn't feel natural because it isn't. And it is not what you want to do. And it's not natural to you to write with your right hand. So you write with your left hand, right? He'll say yes. And I will say, well, it's the same thing with being gay. Being gay, yes, I could choose to be with a woman and have sex with a woman and have a family and all the bullshit that comes with it that people think is required in society to be an upstanding citizen. So I could do all of those things if I wanted to, of course. Of course I could do that. And of course, he could also do the same thing and be gay if he chose to be. So in that sense, it is a choice. You can choose to do whatever you want, yes. But your sexual orientation is not a choice. Your behavior is a choice. Like if you choose to be gay, if you choose to be have sex with gay people is what I'm trying to say. If you choose to have sex with gay people or you choose to have sex with heterosexual people, that is a choice. But what your brain and your neurons and what drives you to have sex with someone those things are not a choice, and those things are hardwired into you before you're even born. And there's plenty of evidence that that's the case, that there is absolutely, it's about hormones released in the womb and whatever, and it's a long story. But anyway, I'll talk about that some other time. But anyway, it is pretty much proven that that is the case, that it's genetic and that it is something that happens in the womb, or not genetic. It's a I can't remember the word they use, but anyway, it's something that happens in the womb when the woman is secreting testosterone or estrogen at a time that is not necessarily in line with the sex of the baby. So, for example, if every baby starts off as a female. I don't know if you knew that. Every baby starts off as a female. And then that's why men have nipples, by the way. We have nipples because we were all girls in the womb. Anyway, so it starts off as a in the womb as a female, and then it gets a dose of testosterone or estrogen, and the testosterone, if its testosterone is released, this female fetus becomes a male fetus, and so the clitoris becomes a penis, and the ovaries become testicles, and they descend, or to some degree, and all of the things that come with being a boy occur because of this huge surge of testosterone that changes the baby from a female to a male. I mean, it's not a completely developed female yet. I'm just saying that that's what it starts off as. So anyway, and if it's a female baby, and it gets estrogen, then it fully develops into a female. Okay, so let's say the opposite happens. Let's say it's a female. It's in this pre-female state of a fetus or whatever, and it ends up being shot with just a dose of testosterone, or a dose of little too much, more testosterone than necessary, or whatever, to develop the baby, and a little, not enough to make a boy, but enough to affect the brain chemistry. And so, and the same thing would happen. Let's say that happens to a girl, then she might become a lesbian possibly, or she might be attracted to females. And if it happens to a boy and he gets estrogen released at a time that's not necessarily optimal for a boy, then he may become gay. Now, that's to say, I hate to say that because that's just one philosophy. I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know if it's all true. I mean, I think it is, but that's one philosophy on why people are gay, is that we have received this boost of testosterone or estrogen at an unoptimal time in terms of biology for becoming a boy or girl wanting to have sex with the opposite sex. Now, I don't think it's a mistake. I think that, especially people who believe in God or there's some plan or whatever, I don't consider it a mistake. I consider it an anomaly, meaning it's not the typical thing that happens. I think that nature, I know homosexuality exists in nature, in the natural world, with lions and bears and every fucking animal there is out there, penguins, whatever. And so it is a natural phenomenon, homosexuality. And there is a reason that nature creates homosexuals. It's either for the fact that we have special gifts that heterosexuals don't. I think we have a special kind of thing about us that they don't and they never will. Or it's because they absolutely wanted to limit the species, and this is one way to prevent overpopulation. I don't know. These are just all theories and philosophies about it. But my point is that whatever the reason is, it's not a person's choice. It is not a person's choice to be gay. So it is something that, as I said, is hardwired in you before you are born, whether you're heterosexual or you're homosexual. And as I was saying, I would say to this little Michael, I would say, yes, it's a choice in the sense that you can choose to do whatever you want. You have free will, of course. But it is not a choice in the sense that what you're going against your nature, is not what most people do. Most people go by whatever their natural inclinations are, and a natural inclination for a homosexual man is to have sex with men. A natural inclination for a heterosexual man is to have sex with women and to be attracted to women. So to go against one's nature by writing with your right hand when you're really left-handed, or vice versa, is just idiotic and stupid. And for people to expect people to do that, or to be, be those things or whatever, be whatever they're not, I guess, it's just abhorrent and dumb. I mean, he grew up in Garland, and that's where I grew up, and so I know all about Garland, Texas, and the Hickville, the Hickville of Dallas to some degree. Really, Mesquite's the Hickville of Dallas, but anyway, Garland is kind of in between. I don't know how to explain it. It's not really hicky. It's just kind of borderline hickish. It's hard to explain. But the point is that there's a lot of bigotry there as well as other parts of Dallas. But there's bigotry there, and especially against gay people and people who don't fit the mold of a heterosexual Caucasian male or female. And so I understand why he thinks the way he does. He was raised by a mother or family that feels the same way as a lot of people do there. But hopefully, with somebody who's telling him the truth and not just bullshit based on religion or personal bias, maybe he will actually have a change of heart and understand. I don't really care I don't really give a fuck if he likes me or likes gay people or whatever. It's not about that. It's just whenever I have the opportunity to speak to someone who is anti-gay, or he's not necessarily anti-gay as much as he thinks it's a choice and thinks it's, wrong or whatever. So I think that it's incumbent upon the person such as myself to actually speak up. And I think it's that way for everybody. When you speak out and you speak up, you're going to change things. You're going to you're going to affect change in that way. And that is important. And I think that if you run into someone who's a bigot, whether it's against gay people or Black people or Hispanic people or immigrant or whatever the case may be, or they're just a Trump supporter, because that kind of covers all the bases, then whatever they are might be, then for God's sakes, call them out on it. Don't just let people get by with saying whatever the fuck they want, doing what the fuck they want, without actually having repercussions. Okay, if they're deemed to need them because what they think is idiotic, stupid, ignorant, or just because they're brainwashed by religion or whatever. For God's sake, speak up. And that includes your family members, your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your kids, your pastor, your teachers, whatever. I mean, I don't care who it is, speak up. And I've always been a vocal person when it comes to rights and civil liberties in general, regardless of whom they're for whom they are or whatever. So I just want to say, please stand up to bigotry and prejudice whenever you encounter it. So that was a long little spiel. But anyway, so I want to talk about my friend of the show, Kimberly. Kimberly and I have developed a good friendship. We've never met. She lives in the Midwest. I live here in Dallas, of course. And so we haven't met yet. We are going to definitely meet, especially if I finish my book this year and have my book launch party, which I'm planning to do. And I'm going to have a lot more time to do right now because what I was working on before, I'm no longer working on. So I will be able to devote more time to my book finally and finish it hopefully this year. But anyway, so Kimberly is awesome. She's an awesome, awesome woman. And she's bright and she's, funny, and I just love her. She's very pretty, and I just think she's awesome. So I think, but she's been unfortunately in this horrible relationship for a long time. And she and I talk about relationships a lot, our own and others and whatever. And she's talked about her, kind of her plight with her boyfriend of many years. I think 5-6 years they've been together or something. I can't remember what she said. Anyway, he's a complete asshole and prick and just a disgusting human being. And I mean, it was obvious to me that that's who he was. And fortunately, finally, she came to her senses and left him and made him leave, essentially. Well, he left her without telling her he was leaving. Of course, after they had sex. And I mean, he's just a fucking asshole. And anyway, so the point is, he knew he was leaving and told her he wasn't, told her he was going to be doing something else. And actually he left her and moved his stuff out. When her kids came home, he was gone. He was like a dad to them. And, of course she was blindsided as well. So he's just a fucking asshole. My point is that, the good thing is that she had come to the conclusion finally, after enduring abuse by this man for so many years, a lot of it emotional abuse, I'd say. I don't know if there was physical abuse or not, but I know emotional abuse for sure. That she finally saw the light and she left him. And I told her how proud I was of her for doing that, and how much I admire her for doing that and having the strength to put herself first in front of someone that she thought she loved and someone that she thought loved her, and put her kids in first and everything else. So I'm very proud of you, Kimberly. I'm sure you're listening to the show eventually. And so I want to tell you, I'm proud of you and happy for you, and your new life is going to be so fantastic and so much better than it ever was. So good for you. So today I went to grab a bite to eat, and at lunchtime, and actually I went to Office Depot and to get some office supplies, and the one near me didn't have them, so I went to the one in Oak Lawn, which is in the kind of neighborhood, whatever. Anyway, so I was eating. I went to Taco Cabana, and I drove through and got a quesadilla, whatever. And instead of just driving home, because it would take a while to get home to eat it, I pulled over and parked at the Kroger. I mean, the Kroger, is that Kroger? I think it's a Kroger. Yeah, Kroger on Cedar Springs, and I think Throckmorton in Dallas. It's in the neighborhood. Anyway, so I was sitting there, and I just finished my quesadilla, and I was going to drive back home, and I saw in front of me on the sidewalk walking Ryan, this kid that I knew when I was in high school. He and I knew each other in high school. We were really close friends, and we were both openly gay. And we stayed friends until 1998, when he became a complete prick and asshole and just fucked everything up. But anyway, I'm not going to go into details of why we stopped being friends, but it was definitely his doing. But anyway, and so, and I run into him about a few years ago, I guess 5-6 years ago, maybe 7, online or something. And he's like, oh, I guess we can be friends. And then we start talking about his life and everything else. He's always been an alcoholic and sort of a booze hound, whatever. And apparently he's sober now, which is fantastic for him. I'm happy for him. But I didn't think that, it's hard when you've known someone for so long, and you or not so long. Well, I knew them for a long time at that point in my life, and he was important to me, an important friend in my life at the time. And, all these years later, it's been 20 years since he and I actually have been in a room together, because that's the year 1998 when we stopped talking. And I left, we were sharing an apartment and everything at the time, and we left. And anyway, it was sad, and it was heartbreaking to me at the time, because I always gave my heart to him, and always gave him, I was always kind to him. I was always good to him. I was always there for him when he needed me, when no one else was there, when his quote unquote friends weren't around. I was there for him. I was like a rock for him. I was like a rock for him. And I knew that that's my role. And I knew that's what he needed as a friend. And so that's the role I played for him when we knew each other. He was not so much there for me. He was a very selfish person, very egocentric and self-centered. And also, as I said, he was an alcoholic and an occasional drug user at the time. So, and of course, me being who I am, I got to save the wounded bird, and, I'm Captain Save-A-Ho, whatever. So I have to always do that. That's how I am. I've always been that way, which is a fault of my own. But anyway, so having known that or whatever, I was always a good friend to him and everything. And so we haven't spoken since, like I said, 5 years ago online or whatever. And I can't remember what happened, but I can't remember what happened, why we stopped talking again. Something happened. He said something rude or mean or whatever. I can't remember what it was. And so we just stopped talking again. And so I saw him today walking by. I was like, oh my God. So I pulled backed my car up and pulled up beside him. He's walking to a convenience store, probably to get cigarettes or something. I don't know. And I saw him, and he was walking, and I was pulled up with my driver's side window, facing the sidewalk he was walking on. And I said, Ryan, like that. He looked at me, and he saw my face, and he's just like nodded, like in a kind of a fuck you kind of way, like whatever. And just tossed his head and went on. He didn't even say anything or stop or anything. So that was unfortunate, because I saw him and I thought about all the good things and good times we'd had together, and as friends, how we'd been good friends. And unfortunately, he didn't obviously feel that way. So I don't know, what happened to us last time, but we stopped talking, and so we no longer are friends. But it's just sad when you have had a friend that was so close to you, and you were so close to them for so long, for so many years, even if it was a long time ago. And then all of a sudden, one day, they act like they barely even know you or knew you. So I really thought, my first thought was, well, I know where he works, so I should just send him a bottle of champagne. and he's an alcoholic, so that would be really nice, right? So anyway, that was the first thought I had, because I thought that was just really rude. It was hurtful for him to act that way to me. Anyway, after all the things I'd ever done for him and been there for him and everything else, and I was not a perfect person, but I was always not perfect, but I was always a really good friend. So I certainly was never I never did anything to him that deemed him to shun me that way. But I've been getting shunned a lot lately. I've been shunned by my husband's sister, his nieces, his nephew, most except one. And today I was shunned by somebody that I've known, or actually 3 people I've known for a while. So I've been shunned a lot lately. And I've been shunned by my family as well, when I was younger, because I was gay. Not my immediate family, like my mother or my grandmother, but my cousins and aunts and uncles and things like that. And because I was always the black sheep, no pun intended, as well as just very, different than my family in general. I was never really, even if I'd been 100% Caucasian, I still don't think I would have fit in with my family, and had been straight. I still don't think I'd fit in with my family. I think I just most of them they were foreign to me because they were just such assholes. And my grandmother was so kind, and my mom was so kind and loving, and that it was always so weird to me. But anyway, so being shunned lately has been a part of my existence. But that is just what happens sometimes in life. I mean, you have to move on, and I am somebody who holds on to things and holds on to people. I don't let go. I definitely am nostalgic, and I'm very much living in the past in my head a lot, which is not good. So I certainly think that, when I'm shunned the way I've been lately, it's certainly hurtful, and it's certainly unfair. I think I don't know. For me, I think anything can be resolved generally, but I don't think that me being shunned by people when I don't deserve it is right. It's not fair. So this is what I say to those people.
Look inside your tiny mind, then look a bit harder, 'cause we're so uninspired, so sick and tired of all the hatred you harbor. So you say it's not okay to be gay, well I think you're just evil. You're just some racist who can't tie my laces. Your point of view is medieval. That's not how you find it. Do you really enjoy living a life that's so hateful? 'Cause there's a hole where your soul should be. You're losing control of it, and it's really distasteful. Fuck you very, very much. 'Cause we hate what you do, and we hate your whole crew, so please don't stay in touch. Fuck you very, very much. 'Cause your words don't translate, and it's getting quite late, so please don't stay in touch. You say you think we need to go to war, well you're already in one. 'Cause it's people like you that need to get slew. No one wants your opinion. Fuck
So yeah, I think that song sums it up, right? Sometimes you just have to have that attitude when you have lost a friend or whomever, and you just sort of are over the whole thing. Even if you're not over it, that's a good attitude to have, in my opinion, because if people don't want you, then fuck them. Because basically, I mean, you don't want to be around people who don't want you anyway, right? So I certainly don't. So I wanted to talk about my book. So as I said, I'm going to have a lot more time now to write, thank goodness. And so I'm going to be writing. I'm going to try to write every day. I'm going to try to write 10 pages a day for the next month. So I should finish my book that way, or editing. Well, the rewrites, I should say. And then I can get down to editing it and finishing it. Because I'm going to actually, by the way, the name of my book is Anathema. And if you don't know what the word means, look it up. But that's the name of my book. And you can also, if you want to follow me and my book information on Facebook, I'm trying to find out where it is. It's on facebook.com/ Okay, so it's on, well, shit. Hold on. Let's see if this is right here. Hold on a second. Wait, okay. So, facebook.com/ what is it called? Okay, here we go. So if you go to facebook.com/ Donovan E. Lord, DONOVANELORD, you'll see information there about the memoir as it comes to fruition later this year. And also you can follow me just there, just to follow me, because I just set that up not too long ago, and I'm trying to get on there more often and say something. But you can also go to my website, DonovanLord.com, and find out more about me there, and also about the book, and et cetera. And other books I'm going to be writing as soon as I finish this one. As I've said, I cannot write another book until this one's done. I have all these book ideas in my head that I want to write, and probably ones that'll be a lot better than this one even. But but they're all like somewhat autobiographical or memoirs or whatever. Like this is a memoir. But I'm thinking I'm going to actually change the style of the book from a novel type memoir to more of a sort of an anthology or whatever of my life. I guess it's sort of like, different stories about throughout that happened in my life, and chronologically probably, but different stories that illustrate different points about, pain or regret or whatever in my life, mistakes I've made or accomplishments, and kind of weave the whole story together that way, as opposed to just trying to put it all together as a novel. But I'm not, because it's really hard to. The problem is I'm trying to figure out where to stop the book. I had decided to stop the book at 25 years old, and I figured that was a good point, because at least in my life span, time to stop it. But there's so much more that happens after 25 for me. I mean, I think a lot more. Before 25, I don't really come of age until then, really, honestly, of myself. And so, I think that even though the first 25 years were really, really wrought with a lot of pain and emotional pain and, bigotry and bullying and what have you, a lot of horrible stuff that was emotionally painful that happened to me then. As interesting as that might be to people, I think that the second half will be much more interesting. So I think I'm going to write the first part. It's just the first 25 years, and then the next book will be just scandalous. Just have to tell you. Totally scandalous. But just very, very true. And then, the thing about my book is that I think it'll make a good read for anybody who reads it, even if you don't know me. And I still want to have a book release party for sure. I definitely want to do that. So tell your friends to follow me on Facebook, or you can follow me on my website, donovanlord.com, or on the Facebook page I just gave you, Donovan E. Lord. So be sure to do that if you're interested. Anyway, so I also wanted to talk about my favorite shows and my favorite shows in the past or whatever, because I have had, as a gay guy, we always have these shows we've had that we identified with to some degree in some way, because the people on the show reminded us of being gay, or they reminded us of ourselves in some way. And so before I go, I wanted to kind of go over some of my favorite all-time TV shows, because I was listening to Radio Andy, which I listened to a lot in the car a while back. I think it was last week, and they were talking about this, and I thought it was an interesting topic. And so let's talk about this. So one of the shows I loved was, of course, and they talked about this, like this was their number 2 show, was Golden Girls. And actually, I don't know what was going on with me, but when they started talking about it, I was completely bawling in my car. I don't know why. Because it's not because they were talking about it. They started playing the theme song, to Golden Girls. Sorry. And I just started, I started like bawling. I didn't know why. So if you've never heard the theme song, it's a really good song, and it's a really well-written song for TV, especially. It has a great message, and it's great just as a tune of its own, even without, being a TV show. So here's the theme song from the Golden Girls, which I absolutely loved, and I'll talk about it more in a minute.
Thank you for being a friend. Travel down the road and back again. Your heart is true. You're a pal and a confidant. And if you threw a party, invited everyone you knew, you would see the biggest gift would be from me, and the card attached would say, thank you for being a friend.
Just a timeless TV theme song. I mean, there's so many good ones, but that show, I think, meant so much to me because I watched it with my grandmother and my mother in the 90s, when it was on initially in the 80s and 90s. And it was a show we would never miss on Saturday nights. And we just loved it. And it reminded me, the women on the show reminded me of my own family. My grandmother, especially, Rose, reminded me of her. Although my grandmother wasn't as dumb as she was or as naive as she was very just, huge heart and kind and bubbly or whatever. And that's how my grandma was. What's her name? Dorothy reminded me a little bit of my mom at the time. She was a little bit more curmudgeonly and just sort of like, sarcastic and everything else. And then I guess I would have been, I would have been Blanche. Anyway, but anyway, I just loved the show, and I love the fact that they just loved each other. First of all, the writing was amazing. Of course, the writing was just it was uncomparable to any other writing sense. It's like there's one of those shows that stands up in time. Like you can watch it over and 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 always laugh at the same punchlines at the same time and know what's coming and still fucking laugh. And the same thing with like I Love Lucy. It was the same way. And that was the same type of thing, I think. And I think because they had such excellent writers and such excellent chemistry and such excellent actors, I think that made such an enormous difference. But the fact that these women loved each other so much, they were strangers and they just all were living under the same roof together, and they had become so close and they were family. And, and they had arguments, and they'd had, thought that their friendships were over, or they thought that they would never see each other again, and they always ended up coming back to each other because that's just the way they were, the strength of their friendship was. So I love that show, and I also think anything with strong women on it, and there's 4 strong archetypical women on that show. You've got like the intelligent, statuesque, like Dorothy. You've got the ditzy blonde in Rose. You've got the sexual, Venus flytrap in Blanche, and then you've got the mom in Sophia. So I think that they represented these archetypical women, much like the way that many of these shows do, like in Sex and the City and so forth. And gay men respond to that. And so, of course, Mark Cherry is one of the writers on the show, and he was one of the he's gay, and he also wrote Desperate Housewives and some other shows, Devious Maids, whatever. And so he's got a very good sensibility, and so that's another reason I think we gay people really gravitate towards the Golden Girls. So anyway, another show that I grew up with watching was was Bewitched, and this is another show we have to talk about. was Bewitched. Now, I saw Bewitched, the first time I think I was a little kid. Of course, it was on reruns all the time on Channel 11. That's what the channel was when we had 4 channels. When I was a kid, it was network TV, and it was network TV, I think, but it wasn't network TV. It was local TV because it was reruns and every stuff. But anyway, it was a local station. They would play it every afternoon or something. So every summer, whatever, I'd watch Bewitched. When I'd stay with my grandmother or whatever, I'd stay, and Bewitched was. I loved Elizabeth Montgomery, first of all. I mean, how could you not love that woman? She was just gorgeous, beautiful, elegant, well-spoken, intelligent. I mean, as a woman, as an actress, as well as the character she played. And so I think that anybody else who played her wouldn't have been successful as it was. But she was truly a magical woman. And I think that, and she was a huge proponent for gay rights. And, of course, Dick York was not gay. He was the first Darren, but Dick Sagant, or Sargent, I can't remember how you say it, but I think it's Dick Sagant. He was gay, and he was openly gay, and later on had died of AIDS. But she was by his side the whole time, and she marched for gay rights when it wasn't popular, and she really supported gay people. And of course, they had a ton of gay people on that show. They had Paul Lynde, for God's sakes. He doesn't get gayer than that, who's Uncle Arthur. And he was on the show, and of course, just brought, the gayness to the show, even though they never said he was gay, and necessarily even nodded to it or anything. It was just like, how could you not know he was gay? Because he was just so gay, Samantha, or whatever. Anyway, he was awesome. And then, of course, Endora, I mean, she was the biggest drag queen ever with all of that makeup on and those flowing caftans and gowns or whatever. She was incredible. And so every gay boy's, dream drag queen or fairy godmother. She was awesome. And did you know that she wore her own jewelry, real jewelry, for that show because they didn't have a budget for the show, really, especially when it first started. And so she wore her own pearls and diamonds and everything else that she'd had throughout her career, and after acting for a long time. And she brought that herself, and some of those gowns as well. And she was just awesome. And so apparently she was highly religious or whatever, but she was really people said that also she was a lesbian. So I don't know what the truth is, but we'll see. Anyway, so that's Bewitched, and I think one reason that gay guys love the show, or gay people in general loved that show, is because it was someone who had a secret, and she had a secret. She was not like everybody else, and no one knew her secret except those closest to her. And in the beginning, no one knew her secret except herself, until she told Darren, of course, and he found out. But you had to keep it quiet. You had to stay in the closet. You couldn't come out as a witch. You couldn't come out and be openly witchy, and because it might scare people or get you killed or whatever. And so she was kind of representative of what a lot of gay guys were going through, and gay women too, of course, at the time when we had no representation on television at all, no open representation. And the representation that we did see was either unmentioned, or it was a campy, representation of being gay. It wasn't a realistic one. So we didn't have anything else to hold to. And even in the 80s, when I was little and was watching this, after it was on from 1964 to 1972, I was still amazed and wondered why I loved this so much. And I think that's why, because I knew I was different, and I already knew I was different because I was biracial, but I also knew I was different because I was gay, and that was the secret I had, and I couldn't tell anybody about it. So it was a good show. And one more thing about it, in the last 2 seasons, I remember there were some really incredible episodes where Samantha, for example, they started tackling more, they had done basically the same show for 5-6 years. Elizabeth Montgomery was tired of it. And so by the 7th season, she wanted to do something more interesting and hard hitting and whatever. And so they started to integrate politics into the show in kind of a fun way. They also repeated a lot of the same storylines from the first Darren on the second Darren. But anyway, they started to deal with more controversial topics. In the last 2 seasons, well, that's just last or next to last season, there was an episode where Tabitha, her daughter, who's a witch as well, was friends with this black girl in her class at school, and everybody was making fun of them because they were hanging out and they were close all the time, and saying that she could hang out with her because she was black and whatever. And so Tabitha put a spell on both of them where they had polka dots. So Tabitha had black polka dots, and the black girl had white polka dots. So it was reversed. And so obviously that's a statement. And then, of course, one of the clients that Darren had refused to let them have black people in their home when they were visiting or something. And so Mr. Tate, who was Darren's boss, said, well, I don't want your account. Now, that was a huge deal because if you know the show Bewitched, you know that Larry Tate, all he lived for was money, making money and getting the sale. That's all he gave us shit about. But when it came to this bigot who was a complete racist against black people, he said, I don't want your account, take your money and get run or whatever. And Samantha, of course, dealt with it in her own way as well. So anyway, it was, even though it was a silly show, it was also towards the end much more poignant and more controversial, and dealt with some serious topics. And of course, the other show that was a knockoff, of course, of Bewitched was I Dream of Jeannie. And that show, of course, was that. This is also what they said basically on the I'm sorry, I'm like completely blocking out here. This is also what they said on the show I listened to, and I agreed with it. They said that was basically the heterosexual version of Bewitched, where in Bewitched you had all of these people who were just like completely. Openly, like they were hiding this open secret or whatever about being gay or whatever, or being witches, but being the same thing essentially. But I Dream of Jeannie was all about the heterosexualism and about the female, about patriarchy and the female being downtrodden and being forced into a bottle, and she had to call him master and all this kind of shit. So I mean, it was really a horrible. It was kind of the funny thing is, it was a true statement on society at the time in the 60s. For God's sakes, that's kind of how they expected women to act in those days. And so to have Jeannie, who had all this power, to have to be subrogate her power for her master was ridiculous. So I think most of the time, what is the problem here? I'm sorry. Here it is. I wanted to play the theme song for you. If I can just get it to play. 1 second here. So anyway, I Dream of Jeannie was essentially the heterosexual equivalent to Bewitched. So that was I Dream of Jeannie. Okay, there's two more shows I want to talk about. One is Dynasty, actually both Dynasty and Dallas. I was obsessed with those shows as a kid, and so was my whole family. My mom and my grandmother and I watched these two growing up, and I was watching it ever since I was a kid. And since I was old enough to start watching, I was like, maybe I was like 6 or something. I remember watching it for the first time. It had been on a few years, I think. Anyway, I remember the whole thing, Who Shot JR and Bobby being alive the next season and everything else. And anyway, so, but between those two, I identify with Dallas because it was in Dallas, the area of Dallas, and it was cowboyish and whatever, and I was familiar with these kind of people because that's the kind of a family I had essentially. But the show that really I had seen as an aspirational thing was Dynasty, because it was really about lots of money and wealth and jewels and all that kind of stuff, and of course, like Alexis Carrington. I mean, how can you not love Alexis Carrington? Yeah, because she was the show in my opinion, because she didn't come into the second season of the show, which is hard to believe that she wasn't there the whole time. But she came in the second season of the show because she was Blake's ex-wife, and she just fucking took over that show. That character was fucking amazing. But she was a strong woman who didn't give a fuck what anybody else thought. And she had all this fucking money. And she was beautiful. And she had all these men around her. Her secretaries were always men. And she did everything against the rules. And that's why I loved her. And I honestly remember, and I swear to God, I remember saying to myself, I want to be like her when I grow up. So maybe that's why I'm such a bitch, because I wanted to emulate Alexis. I don't know. But anyway, it's just hilarious to me that I actually said that. But I remember sitting in front of the TV saying, I want to be like that woman when I grow up. And it wasn't like I wanted to wear dresses or anything. I just wanted to have that kind of confidence and that kind of power and that kind of money and those sorts of things. And so here's the theme song for Dynasty. See, even the theme song was fucking grand. It was awesome. And then before I played the last show, I talked about the last show. Here's the theme song for Dallas. Well, hold on. Here it goes. The funny thing about that show too, about Dallas, real quick, was that show. You know how they always showed that house in the beginning of the credits or the theme song opening or whatever. You know, of course, if you live from Dallas and you've been to the ranch, the South Fork Ranch, which is a real place, if you've been there, you can go there if you're not from Dallas or whatever. But it is so tiny. I mean, it is tiny, 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 tiny. I mean, it's just like a regular house on a lot of fucking land, basically. But anyway, it wasn't a huge deal. But I loved, Linda Gray's character, Sue Ellen, and I loved JR, and I loved, what's his name? Steve. What's his name? Ray, I think was his name. and Bobby, of course. Those are my favorites. So anyway, so the last show that I want to discuss before we go, one of my all-time favorite TV shows. Well, it is my all-time favorite TV show. And this may seem like an odd choice for someone who, it was out in the 80s, from 1985 to 1989. And it was a show that was basically for adults. It was an adult. It was on TV. It was on ABC, but it was it was an adult themed show, and just really loved the show. It was one of my all-time favorite shows. And as a kid, I was obsessed to death with moonlighting. I was only 11 years old. I think it was 11 years old or 10 years old. I was 10 years old or was 11. I don't know. It was 10 or 11 when it came out. And I remember watching the pilot with my mother and my grandmother, and as I watched most things at that age with them, and I loved the show. I thought it was hilarious, and so I got hooked from the very beginning. Now, I loved Bruce Willis. I thought he was so gorgeous when I was a kid, when he still had hair and didn't know he was like completely ridiculously conservative and kind of an asshole. But the character he played, David Addison, I adored him, and I just thought he was the best. He was just fun-loving and free, and he seemed like he was laid back. And unlike Maddie, who was his other half to some degree, who was uptight and cold and icy. Anyway, I'll talk more about it in just a second. Let me play the theme song for you.
Someone by night, some fly by day. Nothing could change you, set and sure of the way. There is the sun and moon, they sing their own sweet. Watch them when dawn is due, sharing one space. We'll walk by night, babe. We'll fly by day. Moonlighting strangers who just met on the way.
So that was the Moonlighting theme song. Now, if you don't know what the show was about, Moonlighting was about, Sybil Shepherd was the star, and Bruce Willis was the co-star. And what it was about was she was a wealthy model. She'd been a model her whole life or whatever, and she had amassed a huge fortune or whatever, and lived in this huge mansion in Beverly Hills or Bel Air or something. Anyway, and she had, her accountant apparently had stolen all of her money. And he stole all of her money, and so she was broke. And she had to sell off all of her assets and things so she could make some money, to pay off her bills or debts or whatever. And one of the things she owned that was just as a tax write-off was this little detective agency in L.A. called Blue Moon Investigations. And Blue Moon Investigations was headed by David Addison, who was played by Bruce Willis. Now, when she goes in to close this place, because by her accountant and her attorney's advice that she close it and sell it, everything, she goes in and she meets this guy, and they have this huge chemistry or whatever, and she does not like him or whatever because she's like this really cold ice queen, beautiful woman. Sybil Shepherd, I thought she was just drop dead gorgeous. I just think always did. And he was into her, and so even though she was kind of a cold bitch, and he even told her she was a bitch, and she slapped him. But anyway, so the point is that she ends up keeping it open after they end up solving by accident this murder case together. And so she's always trying to keep this detective agency running and open, and that's her only source of income. That's all she has going for her is this detective agency, and she has no other means of income. So she's trying to make a go of it, and this guy is like completely doesn't take anything seriously. He's like a complete like tramp or whatever, and just does not give a shit, and she's constantly trying to be the straight-laced one. Anyway, so they end up falling in love over time and that kind of thing, but they don't want to admit it to each other because they're complete opposites, and it's just this whole thing. And it probably sounds boring, but it was a funny show. It was always funny. It was like a slapstick comedy kind of show as well as a serious, and it was it won a lot of awards because the writing was brilliant. It was amazing. They did a lot of really interesting and new things on that show. And it was just a really great show, and it was really well acted as well. And I don't think Sybil Shepherd's ever done anything better, and I don't think Bruce Willis has either, actually, even Die Hard. But it's a show, if you've never seen it before, I definitely advise that you watch it. It's an old show. You can get it on DVD. You can get it on probably online somewhere or something. I don't know. But it's worth it. Watch it from the very first episode through the 4th season and then stop, because after that, it's horrible, because the problem was Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd hated each other's guts because he was a complete asshole and she was deemed always a bitch because when she would do something that the guys would do, they'd call her a bitch. But when the guys would do it, they'd say that they were strong, just like with most women in industry like that. And so she would try to have say in the show that she helped create, yet they would always try to run over her. And so they would have a lot of issues. Both of them had huge egos as well. And so that made, every season they had like maybe between 12 and only one season, I think they had 20 episodes. But every season was like 12, 15 episodes because there were always issues between them. And it was a long, grueling schedule. And then he broke his collarbone in one year and she got pregnant and they had to write that in the show. And so anyway, it was just a huge... if you were alive in those days, you would know what a huge deal moonlighting was and how well known their feud was. But this show kind of gave me my basis for relationships, unfortunately, because there was a very dysfunctional relationship. And I always saw myself as her, honestly. And as I got older and watched it back, I looked at it and I see a lot of myself in that character that she played, for better or for worse. And I wasn't like him. I was like her. And that's probably why I was attracted to him as a kid, because he was the opposite of me to some degree. But yeah, so I think that if you have never seen it, check it out. So anyway, I'll stop rambling now. That's the show. I just wanted to go do a show. It's been a long time since I've done an Off Limits show, and I wanted to do one because I wanted to do one. I had the time and thought I would, and just kind of ramble on tonight. So if you want to know more about me, you can go to offlimitsshow.com, which I haven't updated in a very long time. You can also go to donovanlord.com. You can go to Donovan E. Lord on Facebook, facebook.com/Donovan E. Lord. You can also find the show. It's broadcast on iHeartRadio as well. And you can go there as well if you want to listen to the show, or Spreaker, Spreaker.com. Find me on Facebook or Twitter, or follow me on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And I'm happy to discuss anything you want to talk about on the show. Just give me a call or text me on Instagram or something. Want to text me, message me, DM me, whatever. I'm old, remember. So anyway, have a great night, everybody. And I'll be back next week. Good night.